All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Pimpy and Rice Show. This show is a collaboration between both of our YouTube channels, Pimpy's Investment Chat and Rice Crypto. So depending on where you're watching us at, make sure you're being subscribed to both channels and supporting us both. Links will be down below so that you can do so. And today we are once again joined by Stephen Gleason. He is the CEO of Money Metals Exchange. Before we get started, Pimpy, how's everything going, brother?
It's going really good. I'm just paying attention to what's going on in these debates and keeping up with the news, but as always, not just the news here, but everywhere. And also watching the markets like some obsessed crack habit that I have, but it's been pretty crazy. What about you guys?
Oh, it's definitely crazy. I would say that the political climate is probably one of the craziest we've experienced, and on top of everything else that's happening on a global level, it's interesting. I to say, grab your popcorn, sit back and watch, and where you can participate. It's definitely how you been since last time you've been on the show with us.
Good to be back with you guys. Everything is moving so fast. The news, the political environment, the markets. It's a remarkable time. We're going to be, I'm sure, seeing all kinds of interesting things over the next few weeks. It's really hard to know how this is going to turn out with the election. I don't believe the polls, but it doesn't look too good for Trump at this point. And that's going to have implications on the markets and on the precious metals market. So we can talk about that if you want at some point here.
Well, interestingly,
actually, that's you bring up sorry about that. You bring up a good point. I was just going to ask about that, because if you're listening to the gold and silver bugs, you got people on both ends of the spectrum here, and I'm like, what do you mean? This is crazy. Usually, we're pretty much going in the same direction, but right now you got some people, and I can't help if wonder some of these people are politically motivated with their chitter chatter, or if they're just being sincere. But you got people on both ends of the spectrum making these wild speculations about depending on who wins.
Yeah. I mean, my take would be that, in terms of there's going to be volatility either way over the next month or two, I expect. And, we could have tremendous amount of uncertainty around who even won the election, at least in the first couple of days. Ultimately, I think that if Biden wins, I think that that's going to be even more bullish for precious metals because of the implications of that. I think that includes, more economic difficulties than we're already having. Of course, he wants to lock things down even more. It means that there's going to be massive inflationary spending, even more than we already have, which is already out of control, but even more than that. And I think the concern in general is going to be higher. And, we saw over the 10 years or 8 years that Obama was president, that there was that really stimulated not just precious metals prices, but precious metals demand. There was a tremendous amount of volatility. There was a lot of fear. It's not totally different than the gun sales environment. Obama was a fantastic gun salesman. He was a great gold salesman. I do think that Biden will be the same. That doesn't mean that precious metals aren't going to do well in a Trump victory. Certainly with what's been happening this year, you can see that the circumstances are all very positive for precious metals prices, not good for other things, but positive for precious metals prices. But I think it probably will be even more of that scenario if Biden wins. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it. And then we're recording this on Friday, the 23rd of October. So the debates just took place last night. There's so much information coming out with Biden's son. I'm not sure how that's going to go down. If they can implicate Biden in this before the election, Biden may not even be in the running. So that's something to consider and definitely pay attention to. So, and that's.
I don't think it's going to matter. They've already made it obviously clear this guy could have went shot, raped somebody, killed kids, everything else, and they've already made it perfectly clear they're not interested in covering any of this guy's crimes. Their goal is to push him into the office so we can go back to the status quo.
But there's a guy in front of Congress or Senate today. Bob Bublewski or something like that. I don't remember his actual specific name, but he worked with the Bidens and has a lot of really
Right.
detailed information. I watched a press release that he did
I watched it,
yesterday.
yeah.
So that's crazy. But,
Yeah.
and we'll get into some like political things here. I know that, Pimpy, I know that you said that a lot of your viewers and subscribers had questions in regards to how to transfer parts, if not all their IRAs or 401ks into gold and silver.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to do a quick screen share of the Money Metals website so people can see this, and Stefan can guide us through and kind of explain to everybody.
Sure. Yeah, so this is the page on our site that deals with IRAs, and it's a little bit of a different transaction, obviously, than just buying precious metals outright outside of your IRA. That's easy. You just, go online or call and it gets done. Very straightforward. With an IRA, you can hold precious metals, physical precious metals inside of your IRA, but you can't take physical possession of it. So the way it works, because it could be considered a distribution by the IRS. So that's why there's a depository involved with IRA accounts, but it's not a whole lot more complicated, but there's a couple more steps. So the first step is you would select an IRA trustee or custodian, and we work with many of them. We tend to prefer to work with New Direction Trust Company, which you can see down there on our website. There's actually a direct link directly into their website to create an IRA account. If you were to click that, you would go to their site and create an account. So the first step is to set up your IRA trust account. You got a dog there.
Yeah, sorry, I got somebody knocking on my door. I'll be right back. Continue.
So the IRA trust account, with New Direction Trust Company or Mountain West IRA or many of the others that we work with, we can work with many of them. So you set up that account. So you have your IRA account set up. It's called a self-directed IRA. In that kind of account, you can hold many other assets besides just publicly traded stocks and bonds. You can hold those too, but that's not what these accounts are usually used for. So they're usually used for other types of asset investing, such as real estate, precious metals, privately held companies, debt. You could invest in private lending, things like that. So these are the things that self-directed accounts are used for. So once you set up the account, you then go to your other IRA or 401k and you roll over some of those funds out of that account into the self-directed account. So that funds the account. So you set up the account and then you fund the account through some sort of rollover. And a New Direction can help you with that process. Once the account is funded, you then contact your dealer, such as Money Metals, and you arrange yourself to make a purchase on behalf of your IRA, and you lock on pricing with us. We make a commitment, it's titled to the name of your IRA account, and then you send that invoice to New Direction Trust Company or the other IRA companies we work with, whichever one you've selected, and then they make payment for the order, and once that payment is made, then your order is shipped, or I should say transferred into our depository, into an account in your name for your IRA. And so, again, first step, create the IRA account with New Direction or one of the others, then roll over or fund it with money from your other IRAs or 401ks, whatever amount you want to put into that account.
Okay.
Then arrange for making the purchase of precious metals, and then having the IRA company pay for the purchase, and then it's placed into your depository account for your IRA. And when you want to sell, there's two ways to approach that. You can actually distribute the physical precious metals out of the account directly to yourself as a distribution. So that would be something you would arrange through the IRA company to do, and they would give us instructions. Or you can sell the precious metals back to us or to another dealer, and then we pay your IRA account in cash, or we wire cash to your IRA account, and then you leave it in the IRA and invest it in something else. So it's something that our people can guide you in doing. New Direction in particular has been great to work with. We also work with Mountain West IRA, Advanta IRA, and a number of others. Gold Star, a bunch of them are listed.
Yeah, I got it right here.
Yep. So those are all companies we work with.
Real quick, in addition to that, you had mentioned before we had started recording, we had tried seeing if we could play this video and have the audio come through. I want to recommend that people watch this video on the website, and it's on the IRA link. So when you're looking for it, you would just click on the IRA program part here and actually click on IRAs.
Right.
Scroll down just a little bit and watch this video, because it's going to give a lot of detailed information here that Stefan's kind of already went over that you can check out while you're at the website yourself.
Now, there's one other thing about holding precious metals in your IRA that I want to mention, and that is that not every precious metal, gold or silver item is eligible. So basically, it needs to be either a pure gold or silver item, coin, bar, or round, or it needs to be an American Eagle coin, which is not pure. So for example, you cannot hold South African Krugerrands in an IRA. It's not eligible. You cannot hold a 90% gold rare double eagle coin or whatever the percentage is. You can't hold that. The only non-pure items that you can hold are gold and silver eagles, or I should say gold eagles, because silver eagles are pure. So there are some restrictions. It's not really, and you can't hold pre-1965 dimes, quarters, and half dollars, because that's 90% silver. So there are a few limitations, but honestly, there's so many opportunities. The one thing to avoid, and I really want to emphasize this, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but there's a lot of precious metals IRA promoters out there. And unfortunately, and they're usually the ones that are advertising on TV with the celebrity spokespeople, and they give you an investor kit and they ask for your phone number, and then you start getting lots of phone calls from high commission salespeople. And unfortunately, what they're often doing is pressuring people into buying proof gold eagles, which are eligible to be held in IRAs, but are really the only thing where they make this ridiculous markup and end up taking their customers for a kind of a ride, a huge markup. So that's the thing to avoid. Those companies, they're pushing precious metals IRAs, but they usually try to get you into the highly marked up proof coins. There was one of these companies that just got nailed big time, and we'd seen them out there for several years. It was Chase Metals and Metals.com, and they just hit with a 30 state regulator and federal CFTC lawsuit for bait and switch tactics, pressuring people to sell stocks to buy highly marked up coins that were bullion coins, but they were 100% over spot. And they said $150, $200 million worth of this kind of activity. And, it's the kind of people, the kind of situations that give our industry a bad name. And they got nailed with a major federal lawsuit. So avoid those companies that are making a hard sell, and also that are trying to upsell you into highly marked up items that are not valued based on their metal content, but actually on other things like supposed collector value. Unless you're a true expert, I would avoid that.
Okay, so for the most part, let's just say I'm going to just ask this question on behalf of my subscribers, because I know what they're going to ask. So let me just go ahead and say this. If I'm transferring over there, like we're talking about, and I'm trying to avoid what you're telling me now, I want to avoid the high markup coins, the whole 9 yards. So basically what they're going to ask you is, how can I get more bang for my buck? What would you recommend to people?
Yeah, we always encourage people to look at the lowest premium items first. There may be reasons that you don't want to buy the lowest item, but things like 10-ounce silver bars, we're charging, under $2 an ounce for those, which especially lately is a very low premium. Silver eagles are a bullion coin, but there is a higher premium. And, you can also get more when you sell them, but you're tying up a little bit more of the investment in premium and not in silver. So silver eagles might be $5, $6 or $4 or $5 in that range. So we encourage, I mean, we sell a ton of those, and those are fine. We're not talking, those aren't graded coins. They're not, they're not numismatic.
Wait, I got to stop you real quick. I got to stop you because what you said right now is I want to be, I can already see what they're going to do. So you said, look, buy the ones with lower premiums, the ones that are like $5, $6. I don't want them to think that they're buying silver ounces for $5 or $6. He's talking about the premium above the market. I just want because I can see them now. They're going, "What the hell? I just paid X amount of dollars. Yeah, $5 or $6. I'm on it.
Right.
No, that's above the spot price, so people are aware.
Yes, thank you for clarifying that. So I mean, really, just about everything we sell is of a bullion nature, meaning it's priced primarily based on the metal content. So in silver, $25 an ounce plus whatever premium. Gold, $1,911 an ounce or whatever it is exactly right now, plus whatever premium. All of these premiums that on these kinds of items are relatively small. What I'm talking about that you want to avoid will be the things like proof coins, like a proof silver eagle. They sell that for $70, $80 on the U.S. Mint's a 1 ounce proof silver eagle. We sell it for less, but still, it's more of a nice gift. It makes a nice presentation, but it's not really a silver investment. And so, we encourage people to if you're going to put real money in precious metals, have a very clear understanding of what is the melt value of what I am buying, and am I comfortable with the premium that I'm paying? And the lowest premium items are going to usually be 10 ounce silver bars, 100 ounce silver bars, 1 ounce silver rounds, pre-1965 coins, which you can't hold in IRAs, but are usually nice low premium ways of buying silver. But even, the bullion silver eagles, the bullion silver maples, the silver Britannias, gold eagles, those are all, again, by and large, lower premium items. You just want to make sure that you understand what is the price of silver and how much am I paying per ounce for this thing. And, at the end of the day, as long as you understand that, I think you'll be fine. But avoid the rare coins unless you're a true expert. Avoid the proof coins unless it's for a gift or for fun, in my opinion. I wouldn't put real money in that kind of stuff.
And I appreciate you explaining that. And I do want to emphasize to people that just going through and showing people when we were screen sharing the website that a lot of this information is covered in more detail about what the differences are between the IRA approved products and the ones that are not flagged, goes into why you shouldn't use financial advisors for silver and gold for IRAs, investing into the 401ks with gold, opening a home storage IRA prudent. So there's a lot of information that's definitely here. So you should, and the most important thing that I want to say is at the very bottom, it says doing your due diligence is a must. And I say that all the time. So you really need to do your own research when it comes to this stuff. Don't listen to what me and Pimpy are saying. You can take what we're saying and go further and research it and fact check and make sure that what's being said is correct and that you're being led in a good direction, because any investment that you make, it all has to be personalized to who you are and how your situation is. And you always never want to invest more than you're willing to lose and more than you can afford. And that's not financial advice. That's just basic common sense stuff.
Yep.
Did you have anything else that you wanted to cover, Pimpy, on the IRA 401k situation?
No, I think, again, they just wanted a brief overview real quick.
Yeah, no.
But, I was curious to get
I mean, we had definitely mentioned doing it. We got a little lag, sorry.
Let me mention another thing on some of the benefits. So with an IRA, obviously, when you buy and sell, there's no taxable implication. The only taxable implication is when you take a distribution, whether it be in kind by having the metal sent out or in cash. So if you're, holding for the long term, one thing is, I think we've talked about this before, but unfortunately, the IRS currently misclassifies precious metals, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, bullion as a collectible and charges a discriminatorily high 28% capital gains tax rate for long-term capital gains, as opposed to 15 or 20%, depending on your income, that you would have on stocks or real estate or whatever. So that is one of the downsides of public policy and tax policy relating to precious metals. But if you own it inside of an IRA, and particularly if you're doing more transactions, for example, say you're right now, you say, hey, silver's way undervalued versus gold, which it is. But there may be a point, you know, when silver doubles, triples, quadruples versus gold, that you want to switch some of that back into gold. If you do that inside of an IRA, you're not going to have that taxable implication when you make that swap. So that might be another thing to think about, you know, in terms of how you use, if you think you're going to trade the gold silver ratio over time, which I wouldn't do on a short-term basis, but maybe on a few years at a time basis, then inside of an IRA would be an efficient way of doing it. And also because you don't have to worry about, you know, shipping in and shipping out. It's all inside of the depository. In our case, you know, it's in the same connected, you know, in the same building. And so you don't have to hassle around when you buy and sell because it all happens seamlessly.
Yeah, no, that
So
makes
it's all
sense.
done on one location.
Right.
And in the last video, we'll have the links down below for the first interview that we did with you, because you definitely covered the idea of ratios of silver versus gold and when it may be a good time to take your silver in exchange for some gold and vice versa. So we definitely encourage people to check out that previous interview, because there's no point in rehashing those things when we can just keep the conversation going. And
Sure.
so now that we kind of covered the IRA and 401k stuff, I wanted to kind of get a little bit of your opinions as somebody who's in the precious metals markets about the implications of about a month and a half ago or so, the Federal Reserve coming out with their monetary policy change. And then just recently, the IMF calling for a Bretton Woods too. And for people who are unfamiliar with the Bretton Woods agreement that took place in the 50s, that was when the US dollar was made the world reserve currency and everything was traded against the US dollar. And the reasoning I understood that was the United States kind of came to the aid in World War II. And after World War II, they were like, all these countries got together and like, we've got to rebuild. And they decided to have the US dollar be the world reserve currency. And me and Pimpy have talked about that and how that's gone around. But now we're looking at the potential possibility of losing that world reserve status. And even Trump has kind of mentioned that he would like to do it himself, but it looks like it could be something that may be forced upon regardless. So I really wanted to get your thoughts, Stefan, on how you think that this is going to affect not only the US dollar itself, but how it will affect things like the gold and silver markets and precious metals in general.
Yeah. Well, the original Bretton Woods agreement was, you know, setting up the dollar as the world reserve currency when the British pound had been that before. And, you know, Europe was destroyed and a lot of their gold had been moved out of Europe to the United States. So a lot of it was stored here, including that owned by other countries. So, you know, it was illegal to own gold in the US still at that time because of the, you know, FDR's order in 1933. But it was still the dollar itself, the Federal Reserve note was convertible at least, and that's what the Bretton Woods system basically set up is like, hey, your dollar is as good as gold. We want you to hold dollars. Just know that if you come to the New York Fed, turn in your Federal Reserve notes, we'll give you gold based on the statutory price of gold, which was $42 an ounce, or I think it was 42.
I thought it was set at the $35.
It was at
price,
35, but then I think they raised it.
You would know better than I would.
Yeah, it was at 35, but then there was another bump. But the bottom line is that was the system, and it allowed us to sort of take over the world financial system as a dollar-based system and the SWIFT system, and now, you know, now it's entirely dollars. And we, you know, pushed debt out on third world countries and got them sort of to borrow in dollars and then all this stuff. So, but then what happened in the late 60s, early 70s was that some of these countries saw the profligacy of the, you know, U.S. government and the Great Society and the Vietnam War, and they're like, hey, they're doing a lot of inflation. We're going to go ahead and pick up our gold. Let's turn it in at the Fed, at the New York Fed, and take some gold back to France or Germany or wherever.
How'd that go?
And ships of gold are going across the Atlantic back to Europe, and Nixon was kind of forced by his people around him to break the Bretton Woods agreement, which is, you know, the ultimate default, where the world currency system no longer had any official mooring to gold.
Took us off the gold standard, the Nixon shock.
Took it off. Then that was it. And then, of course, the debt went through the roof. So what they're talking about now, though, and I watched the speech of this IMF, the managing director of IMF, and first of all, I'm looking at her, and she obviously thinks she's this world leader You know, you can tell she's got this just sort of statist, you know, paternalistic kind of attitude. And, you know, what she's talking about, a new Bretton Woods moment, is basically, to me, it sounds like AOC's Green New Deal, first of all, which is massive, massive money printing for global warming, you know, related, you know, investments, and then a preferential lending to certain preferred groups of people, whether it be poorer countries or women or young people. And, you know, basically it's sort of like a public policy thing they're doing, which is we want to use the world banking system to deal with the green revolution and fund it. Basically, that was probably the most alarming aspect of it, but also to expand debt and to encourage the member banks of the IMF, because remember, the IMF is the central bank to the central bankers, right? And so all the central banks are members of the IMF, and there's sort of this overlay, and they want to expand their credit, their balance sheet to another $1 trillion, and they want to encourage all the member banks, the central banks, to do the same. Which, you know, they don't need much encouragement. Frankly, no. I mean, we've got $4 trillion in new debt this year alone. But the bottom line is, it looks to me like it's more central planning through monetary policy. So to call it a Bretton Woods moment, I mean, that's what she calls it, because I guess that brings up positive, you know, things. But really, it's just more big government, more expansion of credit, more inflation, more picking winners and losers in the economy, and doing it now at an even higher level, where the IMF is trying to raise its profile in this whole global, you know, push towards, you know, more globalism, green energy, more debt, and more inflation. So the implications of that are, you know, more inflation. I mean,
right,
and more bailouts and more debt. So I mean, it's just more of the same. It's interesting in the last year how the Green New Deal, which was, you know, like AOC, not that she's probably came up with this, but she said, well, why don't we just have the U.S. Mint mint 2 $1 trillion coins and sell them to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve will, you know, instantly monetize those. So that, you know, that's her approach, and we'll use that $2 trillion to fund, you know, the Green New Deal and everything else. So it's just interesting. That was such a fringe thing, and now, like, you know, not only are we seeing a lot of that kind of so-called modern monetary theory, MMT, come into play this year, but now you have the IMF basically adopting that agenda and saying, we're going to push that out through all the central banks. So, I mean, I just think that that's just, you know, putting everything that we're seeing happening on a higher trajectory, which is more debt, more inflation.
Here's what I noticed about the IMF meeting, that I kind of had a feeling this was going to happen. But once they started talking, there's no doubt they're pushing the agenda of the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. Right. And they have a habit of trying to, like you said, they're using the Bretton Woods, but is it really the Bretton Woods? It's like when you go to the platform or the website for the Great Reset, it says in there, hey, we're going to go do a reset on capitalism. But then when you read the policies, you're like, this isn't capitalism. This is socialism. But here's what I don't like about what they're talking about. They want to do this universal basic income, and it has to be digital only. Here's what I didn't like about it. And what they're talking about is, if you own precious metals, gold and silver, you are allowed to exchange your precious metals for that digital currency, but you cannot use the digital currency to buy more precious metals. And I was like, man, see, they're just trying to steal the wealth from people. That's exactly what they want to do. I don't want to get all conspiracy sounding, but the IMF is and I think step in lock with the Great Reset is what it is. And AOC, she can't speak for herself. She doesn't know how to make a good drink at a bar. Look, somebody's feeding her these lines is what it is. And they're all part of that same agenda. I don't want to sound again but it's exactly, if you research it and watch it like I do, you can spot the people. I mean, Joe Biden's presidential slogan is Build Back Better. That comes directly from the Great Reset. you could go in there and see his policies almost mirror what we see in there. But not just him. Boris Johnson has Build Back Better. There's other world leaders that's their slogan. There's no doubt, you know, that they're trying to push us towards this bureaucratically controlled monetary system.
And that's the, you know, this ties into the war on cash, and this ties into negative interest rates, and this ties into why the central planners in general hate monetary assets that are outside of the electronic system they control. Which is why they don't like gold and silver. It's out there, and it can discipline them, and it could in a very big way discipline them, and they want to avoid that. But you know, and now I've noticed that the war on cash has gotten a whole new sort of argument. It's like, well, you know, physical cash, first of all, it's used only for illegal purposes. There's, you know, if you have something to hide, you know, if you have nothing to hide, you wouldn't be using physical cash. But also now, of course, it carries the virus. It'll kill you, you know. And it'll stay alive on the paper money for 30 days, you know, and if not longer.
Yeah, so they're I mean, we could see this.
There's no doubt that the Rona was the be all end all for this agenda, because if you just go there, 50 years in the making, they had 100% intentions on making sure all the central banks had already adopted cryptocurrencies. They would be 100% digital platform. This way, then you had no choice. If they wanted to do a bail-in, they could do a bail-in. They want to do high inflation, super inflation, they could do that.
Interest rates.
Their goal is to, they have no intentions on letting people do, you know, generational wealth transfer. They're just not going to do it. They want everybody.
You can't even save. The system's not designed for you to save. And we're going to do, me and you are going to record a video after this one going into some of the stuff that me and you talked about yesterday in regards to all this, so we can kind of let loose on it. In regards to the IMF and the Bretton Woods moment thing, are you gathering anything that's mentioning the US dollar losing its world reserve status? And because I've been hearing a lot of talk about, I mean, we've been hearing the digital dollar, and I've been hearing about a global digital currency as well. So do you think there's a possibility that the US dollar will lose that world reserve status, and that we could see a global currency?
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately we will. Yeah, and we're moving, and countries are positioning themselves to get ready for that, you know, with bilateral agreements in their own currencies, you know, holding more reserves in other currencies, holding more gold, you know, especially in Asia. And, you know, Russia, China, India, these countries are buying, they're massive buyers of gold.
What effects do you think that this will have on the US dollar ultimately if it loses world reserve status? Like how does it affect the everyday American?
It's the ultimate, it's the reason that we've been able to get away with what we've been doing up to this point. We are able to tax the entire world for what we're doing through the inflation tax. So we're able, you know, an individual country that doesn't have everyone else holding most of their currency as a reserve asset, or a lot of that outside of the country. An individual country couldn't get away with the things we're able to do. And so it has been a tremendous privilege that we've then abused to the point where people are desperately, if not, you know, slowly, but they're desperately trying to get ready to move beyond relying on us. But, you know, we control the entire global payment system still, the SWIFT system. And we can turn people off. You know, we can make them unpeople. You know, we are unpersons, like we did with Iran and Venezuela, and you know, we do it to others. You know, and we can debate whether, you know, we should be using the power that way. But the bottom line is, we show, hey, we can basically isolate you completely financially because we control the system, and you can only do that so long before everybody kind of, you know, starts taking actions to become more protected from that. And so we, you know, that's why I think, you know, we're most at risk, because there's so much imbalance to what we've been doing, and people have so much incentive to try to get away from the controlling US dollar controlled system because of what we're able to do, and make them all pay for a lot of what we're doing. And so I think ultimately there's a reckoning in terms of how that plays out. I mean, it could happen quickly, it could happen slowly. It's hard to know. I mean, the crisis happens. I mean, I know that the IMF has their own currency, their own super currency called the strategic drawing right. Yeah, and so that is there.
Special drawing rights, is that what we're talking about?
Strategic, special drawing, yeah, special drawing rights,
SDR,
SDRs. And And so that system was created, I think, in 1969. It's been around for a long
It's
time.
technically the first digital currency. Because it was created in 69.
So yeah, so they have that system in place, and it's a way of creating credit between banks using this supranational currency.
Okay.
And so I think that maybe that is where this kind of goes, is it kind of gets kicked upstairs. The dollar starts, failing. Then the IMF steps in. The SDR becomes even more sort of central.
No, that makes sense, man. And
I think I was gonna say, I think we're a lot closer than people think. I was gonna ask Stefan about this. So it seems or appears that China and even Russia have stopped focusing on purchasing gold and are now buying up silver and signing exclusivity contracts with mining companies. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, there's been more of that kind of thing going on. Yeah, because they want to because working through London to get your silver supply, especially with all the distortions in the market that we've seen, and the potential defaults and actual defaults and spreads between New York and London that are blowing up people's hedge books. And so, I mean, working through that system to price and obtain your precious metals is becoming more of an iffy thing. So combined with the potential shortages of silver, it makes sense, particularly if you absolutely need it, for whatever reason, industry or, going direct to a mining company, particularly if it's in your part of the world, is a smart thing. And there is more of that. I don't think that's a big thing yet, because I think that's developing, but I don't think that's a major activity yet.
What do you think about their because they bought a ton of gold since the beginning, or not gold, but silver since the beginning of October, China. So what do you think about the idea that they're buying this because they are ready to move into the gold standard and start producing silver coinage?
Yeah, well, China actually was on a silver standard not only a few decades ago. So there's a lot of, cultural understanding of gold and silver as money in relatively recent cultural understanding of that. For us, it's been 100 years or more, seems. I don't really have a whole lot of special knowledge in what you're talking about. I mean, I know that these countries are buying a lot of silver, India, and, I know that even the ETFs, you can look at gold inflows into the gold ETFs versus inflows in dollars into the silver ETFs. And the money flows favor silver, especially given how much smaller the silver market is. And so I think there's a lot of pressure building in silver. And we're already seeing that, since the ratios come down to in the 70 range, or I guess it's back up to 80, but it can go way down, and I expect that. And for all these reasons.
Well, I mean, you look at when it comes to silver, just the it's second in commercial uses only to oil, and it's only going to grow over time. There's a lot of speculation that eventually silver will just pass up gold when it comes to value, just because of the demand for it and the scarcity. But what I was going to say was, when you see the comics expand their list of people that they get silver from, I said, man, look at it. If that's not an indicator that it's scarce, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on that?
Well, exactly that. I mean, there was
China,
a major,
that includes China.
there was a major problem in the physical precious metals market in London and New York over the last 9 months. And it started in March, and it continued, and there's still some issues. And that there was just not enough metal, especially in New York. And there were issues in London, but a lot of it was, well, it's needed in New York. There is some in London, and then there was this gap in pricing, and lots of things were happening. People were getting into financial trouble. But yeah, they need more money to come in. More metal to come into the exchanges, and so they needed to expand the list dramatically of the good delivery bars, and that's what they did. Because there were too many problems. Like, well, we have bars, but they're not good delivery bars. Oh, okay, no problem. Well, we need to make those good delivery bars. And so so now a lot more eligible refiners, are able to help. with the problem.
Yeah, I just don't know if I would trust China to send me over reliable gold and silver, since they've been busted before for sending fake stuff over. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
the fact that the comics is relying on China for part of this, I'm like, oh, good Lord. We'll see where this goes.
Yeah.
Crazy, man. Well, Stefan, I do appreciate your time. I know Pimpy does as well. I want to thank you for giving like your thoughts on how this Bretton Woods moment could play out and how it affects the dollar and how it would affect the precious metals markets. And like we said on the first interview that we did with you, we're going to try to do this once a month. So anybody who has questions on both of our channels, feel free to comment down below so we can bring it up for the next conversation that we have with Stefan. Before we wrap things up on this video, Mr. Pimpy, did you have anything you wanted to say before we let Stefan close it off?
Yeah, real quick. I'm just curious to get maybe a prediction, Stefan. Where's gold and silver by the end of the year?
So I think it'll be higher. I think silver in particular will be higher. I think there's going to be a lot of, in terms of where, I don't think it's going to be at $50 by the end of the year. I mean, I wouldn't be completely shocked if it gets there, early next year. I think it might, I think it's going to break above 30 and by next spring, and decisively break above 30. Obviously, the all-time high in Federal Reserve notes is like $49. Silver's behind. Silver's going to play catch up. Silver, that's what silver does. It plays catch up. In a bull market, silver outperforms. So, we already at all-time highs for gold. Gold has not really wanted to break down below the $1,900 level, which was a really important level before. So I think gold and silver both going up. By the end of the year, I'd say gold over 2,000, silver $27, $28. But that said, the Biden victory idea, I think that's probably more bullish than a Trump victory for the metals. Certainly for retail demand. I think if Biden wins, I think it's going to get really, really crazy again in the retail market. I think the gun market.
You think people are going to panic and run to precious metals?
That's what we had happen during the Obama years, because people understand, there's a relationship between politics and precious metals availability and demand, but also, I mean, just the inflationary side of things. Biden wants to be even more loose with monetary policy, debt, and he wants to invest in huge amounts in debt-funded infrastructure, the Green New Deal, all that stuff. Although he says he's not in favor of that, but we know he's going to be doing a lot more of that kind of stuff, and that involves a lot more inflation. So that is going to be bullish for the nominal dollar price of precious metals. But I don't think we're going to see a moonshot probably until at least next year in terms of both of these metals. But who knows? I think the other thing is volatility.
Yeah, I'm thinking somewhere. I'm thinking just a little above 30, maybe by the end of the year for silver, and believe it or not, maybe above 2,200 for gold. Yeah. Maybe. I think just because of the unpredictability of what's going on right now with the elections. But I mean, I think if Trump gets in there and he somehow manages to grab control of the House and the Senate, which I just don't believe the polls. I think the Republicans are a lot better than we think. But if they do, and he gets what he wants, which is to move us into the gold standard, I think that could have a serious impact on precious metals.
I think, honestly, it's hard to envision any scenario that is not positive for precious metals right now.
Yeah.
You have everything. You have economic, total chaos, unemployment through the roof, business failures, debt default, massive inflation, massive money printing, political turmoil.
World economic crisis.
You have rioting in the street, lawlessness,
social unrest.
You have Nancy Pelosi potentially being president in January. If she, there's no declared victory. I mean, there's so many things happening that are a reminder of why you want to diversify outside of the establishment.
You just made me puke a little bit in my mouth, and I'm trying to swallow right now. Yeah. So sorry about that. So hey, I got one last question for you, Stefan. Let's see what you think of this. Do you think you'll ever see us move to a Bitcoin standard?
A Bitcoin standard? I don't think so, but I think that Bitcoin has a promising future. And
I think if it could be included in somebody's currency basket if they created one.
Yeah.
I could see Bitcoin
Yeah.
being there.
I mean, you should have cryptocurrencies. Some of them are scams, unfortunately, but many of them are. And actually, I went to a Bitcoin conference one time, and there were so many carnival barkers at that. It was the most, it was like
You
the
gotta
Wild
definitely
West.
do your own research. It's just like precious metals industry.
Right.
I mean, everything you got to do your own
But
research.
there's some bona fide
good
value
players.
there. There's some obviously some utility there, and there's advantages, and many of them are good. And obviously, Bitcoin's held up very well, and many of the others.
Countries have used it to send money to avoid sanctions as well. So I mean,
Right.
it does, taking out that intermediary, that third party is a powerful thing that people just haven't really quite realized how powerful that is.
Right. Right.
Yeah, everybody knows I'm not a big fan of cryptocurrencies, but when I tell people, look, I'm being honest. I think there's a window of opportunity once you could benefit from it.
Yeah.
Right now, I have everything in Bitcoin and Ethereum, mostly in Ethereum, but for the most part, just those two. I don't like anything else. It's mostly because, again, I'm just not a fan of it. I don't trust it.
Well, okay,
it's no different than a fiat currency.
Just on a final note, Money Metals Exchange, they take cryptocurrency.
Oh, yeah,
Not
there you
every
go.
cryptocurrency, but they do take cryptocurrency if you want to buy some precious metals through them. You have banks now allowing custodying of crypto. You obviously have Jack Dorsey from Cash App with his thing, the Coinbase stuff with the connections with the U.S. Treasury. Now we can look into Visa,
PayPal,
card, now PayPal, Venmo, people like Paul Tudor Jones, all these different investment companies that are actually buying Bitcoin and putting it on their balance sheets. It's here. It is
for sure. It's a real tool, and we love to deal in Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and Ripple and Dash and EOS and a couple others. You can buy using that as a payment medium. You can sell precious metals to us and be paid in those coins. We're the most enabled of any precious metals dealer for doing business, and it's another currency. It's another way of transacting, and it's less than 1% of our transactions, probably way less. Except a couple years ago, there was a big bump up in interest, but overall, it's less than 1%. But we think it's a legitimate way of paying and being paid, and we're happy to help people to facilitate that. We don't sell. Like you said, we're not a dealer of Bitcoin or anything like that.
Right.
Yeah, I can't. Again, every chance I get to encourage my subscribers to go into precious metals, I do. I think there's risk in any type of investment. But the one that I feel the most confident about, obviously, is precious metals. I'm all in when it comes to precious metals. Don't get me wrong. I do have some, a few $1,000s in cryptocurrencies, but for the most part, I don't hold my money in a bank. Most all my money is in precious metals, and I got a few thousand sitting in cryptocurrencies. That's it.
I'm about the same way. Well, Stephen, I honestly appreciate you sharing your perspective on everything. And I guess as always, like I said, we're going to have these conversations continuing. So anybody who has questions for anything related to Money Metals Exchange, I would definitely encourage you to comment on both of our videos. If you're not subscribed to the other person's channel, make sure you're checking out both channels, subscribing to both, hitting that like button, commenting and sharing. And as I said, as always, this conversation will be continued.